I'm so proud to represent the team at Dentsu Communications in welcoming you to the Siemens Foundation's Eliminating Disparity, Encouraging Diversity in STEM event. We have some truly exceptional people in the room today, both on our panel and here in the audience among our guests, and we look forward to hearing from all of you about this very important topic. And when we conclude the panel part of the discussion, we do want to open it up to the House so that you all have a chance to express your thoughts and questions as well. Just a few words before we get started. I expect you're all familiar with the Siemens Foundation. They are a national leader in supporting STEM education initiatives. They invest more than $7 million annually in all sorts of great programs, including the Siemens We Can Change the World Challenge. You may know that, the Siemens Awards for Advanced Placement. There's the Siemens STEM Academy for teachers, many others, as well as the Siemens Competition in math, science, and technology. And we're very excited to have the $100,000 winners of that program here with us today as well, and we'll give you a chance to meet them shortly. Dentsu is so proud to partner with the Siemens Foundation on this event. Dentsu specializes in working with education, nonprofit, and advocacy communications programs, and Siemens was actually our very first client in that space. So we're so thrilled to be here with them. We actually last year, working with Siemens, won one of the nonprofit PR awards for Best Media Relations Campaign. So it's just a wonderful partnership, and I would like to recognize a few people from the Siemens Foundation before we get started. First and foremost is a woman who's done so much to extend the impact and the reach of the Siemens Foundation's programs. She is the president of the Siemens Foundation, and I think I can share this publicly. It's public knowledge now. She's also just been named one of the 25 most influential black women in business, and will be celebrated for that a little later this spring. So please join me in recognizing Jennifer Harper Taylor. And I also just want to thank Lauren Espin for being such a wonderful collaborator, and Laura, too, for being here from the Siemens Foundation. We have one more VIP from the Siemens Foundation, and you'll meet him later. He's on our panel. When we first started talking to the Siemens Foundation about doing this event and exploring these issues of diversity in science and math, we realized that we had other clients who are concerned about these issues as well, and we are so pleased that many of them are here today as well. I just want to say thank you to Diane Sukamaki from the College Board, who's here today. They're a very important partner to the Siemens Foundation and a Dentsu client as well, I'm happy to say. Nicole Gillespie and Jody Galosi are here from the Knowles Science Teaching Foundation, as well as one of the amazing teaching fellows that they support. So we're very happy to have you here too. In fact, I'm pleased to say we also were just nominated for a few more of those nonprofit PR awards for our work with the Knowles Science Teaching Foundation. We also have some guests from Macaulay Honors College at the City University of New York. They're our newest client. We thank them. And I believe we have some people from the Marine Stewardship Council as well. So that does it. But I would be remiss if I didn't just give a quick shout out to our other Dentsu team members. We have Anya Grotel-Brown, who is here, Lisa Kirandungo, Angeli Sexina, Joe Jamera, and Matt Dording. Thank you all for your support on this event. So how can we broaden access to STEM fields? That's what we're here to talk about. We have some really remarkable people. I think that we'll all learn something today. We may not solve all the issues, but I think we'll definitely walk away with lots of food for thought. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Many of you may know her. She is an Emmy award-winning broadcaster. She was an anchor and reporter for News 4 New York. She was a reporter for New York 1, and she now is a host and reporter for CUNY TV's Science and You. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, Carol Ann Riddell.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, all of you. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate being here. It's an honor for me. I mean, what a brainy bunch we got up here. I'm sure it's going to be a terrific discussion, and I'm really looking forward to being part of it. Just a couple of ground rules on that front. Years of TV news have made me a pretty good time cop. So if I say keep it brief or wrap it up, please don't take it personally, no offense. We just want to keep the conversation lively and moving along. So we are going to start by introducing all of our panelists. If each of you could just give us a minute or so about your background and how you relate to this topic, and why don't we start right down here.
Well, I'm Paula Apsell. I'm the senior executive producer of the Nova series and Nova Science Now series on public television. I've been doing that for quite a while. I don't even want to suggest to you how many years. But in fact, one of my former interns is here and just ran into him. So, and I think that, I mean, I'm so impressed with the number of educators in this room who really deal with this issue on the front lines. And so what I have to ask myself all the time is, what is the role of the media in promoting diversity, especially in careers in science, technology, engineering, and medicine? And I think that our role really is to present affirmative images so that youngsters of all types, and we do, even though our programs are created for adults, we know that they're family viewing in many homes and that many kids watch our programs. And I think the thing that makes me happiest of anything that people say about our shows is when people come up to me and say, I became an engineer because I watched Nova. I watched your program on lasers and I decided I wanted to be a physicist. And a lot of people do, and so that's the most rewarding part of my career. And I think that our aspiration for our program is to be able to have kids of all types, be able, you know, boys and girls of all different races and ethnic groups, be able to watch our programs and see themselves and say, boy, that looks like, first of all, we want them to say, that looks like fun, that looks like an exciting career, maybe I should think about that. But most of all, they have to see people who look like them so that they could say, I could do that. And I use the word aspiration very honestly because I don't think after all these many years, we're there at all at this point. And to a large extent, that is because there are so many issues in scientific fields and engineering with diversity. And we make an effort. I won't even suggest to you with budgets and timelines the way they are that it's a good enough effort, but we keep trying. And as we try, and as there is employment in scientific fields of people from all backgrounds, I think we'll get better. But right now, it still remains an aspiration, but I think it's something that's very important that the media can and should do, including Nova.
Jerib.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Jerib Carson. I am an academic intervention specialist at the Harlem Children's Zone here in New York City. I also teach 8th grade science. So I'm very passionate about science learning, and I spent about a year and a half, maybe 2 years in Boston working on a master's in teaching at Tufts, and at that time I was also teaching middle school science at the Roxbury Middle School, which was started by Deborah Meyer as a pilot school, I believe the late 90s. So that was a very interesting experience, and the transition here to New York and teaching science in another urban setting has presented a lot of different challenges, and some that I'm very pleased to meet successfully. I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about, I like to describe it as endeavoring to explore the various sciences that explain the world in which we live in. Something that I do with my students, or try to do with my students every day. I think it's important. I think it's very important that that process be started early, particularly in elementary and middle school, so that those seeds can sow and the roots can actually grow well into the future. And I think if it's something that we all concentrate on vigorously, it's certainly something that that can be achieved. And I think the reality of the success rate in terms of increasing diversity in STEM fields is something that that we can meet.
My name is Flatow. I host a radio show on NPR called Science Friday. We also have podcasts that are broadcast as companions to Science Friday. We have about 1.5 million listeners each week. We have 25 million downloads of our podcasts. And we do something of interest to you. It might be we do new videos every week, educational videos that are about 3 minutes long, having much to do with what Jerib was saying, using everyday science as teaching moments. We create, actually with the New York Hall of Science here in New York, we create teaching curricula out of them. And teachers tell us all the time, you know, we have hundreds of them on our website at sciencefriday.com. You know, we're doing that unit this week, and it was a great teaching moment for you to watch that video and then use it as a kickoff to what we're doing in our classroom. And I view our mission as trying to make science as interesting and as much a topic of conversation around the dinner table or on tweeting or whatever the modern method of speaking is these days, communicating, as any other topic, as sports, of business. People should be talking about science, everyday science, and we use science news because we're a talk show and interview scientists as a means of doing that. For example, this week, you may be aware there was a big solar flare that happened, and this was a great teaching moment, if there ever was one, to talk about the sun and how all things that happen and the weather and things that are connected to it. And we also bring on a diverse group of scientists. Now, you can't see the scientists because we're on radio, but we do interview them in some of our videos. But we just want to use the world around us and the news in general to help teachers by making the videos, to let them use those videos in their classrooms, also to allow teachers and students and the general public just to talk about science. We can get people to talk about STEM every day, like they're talking about, hey, are the Giants going to win the Super Bowl? You know, maybe the next step is going to be talking about science. Then I think our mission is successful, because an informed public is certainly one that is ready to make decisions about their society.
The Giants are in the Super Bowl? My name is Tom McCausland, and I'm chairman of the Siemens Foundation. And I'm an engineer by training and use that in practice through my 40 years in business with Westinghouse and with Siemens. And as chairman of the Siemens Foundation, and I've been involved since the beginning, we founded it in '98, our job is to create programs that help kids in K through 12 to pursue careers in the STEM disciplines. And so our job is to get these programs, motivate both students and also teachers to be able to bring STEM into the classroom at an early age, so young people can not be afraid of science and recognize that the answers to many of the problems that exist today in the world are rooted in the scientific disciplines, and that they can have great careers that are energizing, they're interesting, and oh, by the way, they can even have a career making money in math and science. So our job is to try to stimulate that in the U.S. workplace.
Great. I'm James Jorasch. I'm the creator of the Science House Foundation, and my background was as an inventor and entrepreneur, and I bring sort of an entrepreneurial flair to the foundation, and we're all about being kind of lean and mean and bringing technologies to bear to get kids excited about science all over the world. So we're currently have kind of operations in six continents, and I think about more than a dozen countries now. And our goal is to get kids relatively young, sort of in the middle school age range, so that we can get them fired up and excited and invigorated about science before they even get to high school, so that by the time they get to high school, they're asking to take the calculus courses or the chemistry courses, the physics, because they're excited by it. And we're about rethinking the way that science is taught in a more creative manner. And we believe there's a lot of creativity in science. And when you teach kids, here's the question, here's the answer you're supposed to get, you're draining the creativity out of them. And science is so much more exploratory than that. It's like finding out what the questions are and discovering that maybe there is no answer, or maybe there are 50 right answers to it. So it's encouraging the kids to be flexible in the way they think and creative. And so our projects, we have a number of them. We send out microscopes to kids. We have a robotics program, Planet Checkup, where the kids can use technologies to check out the environment and figure out whether or not there is any radiation coming from that nuclear reactor down the road. Or go take a look at the water quality a mile south of that factory and see whether there are more particulates than there should be. And we also have a video program as well, where we're trying to use technologies, cutting-edge technologies, to deliver videos. And we have apps and iPhone and iPad apps with videos to help science teachers teach science. And so those are kind of the programs that we have in place right now, but our goal is very much use technology, break down the walls of the classroom, make this one global classroom. Get the equipment in the hands of the kids, get them exploring the world, and get them sharing. So we have websites built so that the kids in Sydney, Australia can discover something on the beach and upload it and share that with the kids in China or in Japan or in Brazil, so that it's more of a cross-cultural and more of a collaborative approach to science, which we think is the future.
Good afternoon. I'm Irving McPhail, President and CEO of the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering, otherwise known as NACME. We're a very venerable organization, currently in our 38th year of operation. Since our inception, NACME's mission has been to increase the number of African American, Latino, and American Indian women and men who are successful in engineering education and the engineering workplace. The unique governance model for NACME is that we are supported by a group of 38 of the world's leading technology companies who provide financial support as well as intellectual guidance and direction for our efforts. As a result of a recently completed strategic planning process, Connectivity 2015, NACME is currently pursuing a strategy that is anchored around 4 KRAs. The first is scholarships. We have emerged over the last 38 years as the largest private provider of scholarship support at both the undergraduate as well as graduate level for underrepresented minority students pursuing degrees in engineering, having awarded well over $124 million in scholarship support to more than 24,000 students. At the same time, develop relationships with about 160 colleges and universities across the nation. Our second KRA is pre-engineering. We're active at the middle school, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, and a unique Academy of Engineering model, which hopefully we can discuss, and in our community college effort. Research and program evaluation is our third major area of focus. NACME is the most authoritative source of data and information on the participation of underrepresented minorities in engineering education and the engineering workforce. And our fourth major area of direction is policy. We're attempting now to figure out how, after almost 4 decades of flying below the radar, actually getting the job done in terms of helping to move the needle, how we can begin to influence some of the national policy discussions that are taking place around the area of U.S. competitiveness, the role of STEM, and for us at NACME, the critical importance of diversity and equity to making certain that those goals are achieved.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Shearer. I'm the 2011 National Teacher of the Year. I was inspired to become a science teacher while I was a student at Princeton University, and I had the opportunity to volunteer in a classroom at the New Jersey School for the Deaf. And I began to teach them chemistry and physics. And I was so amazed by their enthusiasm, by their willingness to learn, and I realized from the very first day that it's all about abilities and not disabilities. And I made it my mission from that point on to bring chemistry to as many students as possible. In my 15 years of teaching, I've taught for 4 years at the Maryland School for the Deaf. I brought AP Chemistry to that school for the first time in the school's 135-year history, taught the course entirely in American Sign Language. I've taught 11 years at my current school, Urbana High School. Just in the past 5 years, we've grown the enrollment in AP Chemistry from 11 students to 92 students. And I echo everything that's already been said by my colleagues about the importance of getting the students young and getting them excited, because all students are born scientists. They're all born scientists. They're the best scientists that we have. Unfortunately, somehow we seem to beat that scientific spirit right out of them. Sometimes it happens at the high school level where they've had a great experience in science all along, but then all of a sudden science becomes really hard. And then it's a matter of keeping them in your class. And it's been a mission of mine, a goal of mine, to retain all of my students in AP Chemistry, to never have a dropout. And I've never achieved that goal. Last year, I had 1 student drop out of the 92. So I ended the year with 91 students, but it's all about that one and what we can do to keep those students from dropping out. And one of the big selling points that I use with my students is I try to help them understand that the STEM skills that they learn in any science or math class are skills that are going to translate into every other area of their lives. I mean, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creative problem solving. Yes, we want to build the pipeline of scientists, but we also want our students to be equipped with the skills to succeed in whatever they decide to do.
Good afternoon. I'm Patricia Simmons from the National Science Teachers Association, and it's indeed a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I bring greetings from NSTA. NSTA is the world's largest association dedicated to science teaching. Our membership is primarily in the U.S., but we also have about 20 other countries that comprise our membership. Our goal at NSTA is to provide the best science teaching and learning professional development for our teachers, bottom line. Our goal is all about working with teachers so that they ensure that all of their students are successful in science in particular. So that has been something we've worked through various initiatives such as the New Teacher Academy, where we work with beginning teachers to really help them understand what it means to be an effective teacher in a classroom when you have 30 students in there and they all come with different backgrounds and understandings and beliefs about science, or they don't like science. How can you reach out and touch those students and fire them up with a passion for science that we all share? So that's our goal. We do this through our conferences, and by the way, I want to invite everyone to our national conference in Indianapolis in March, and we're also having a STEM Forum and Expo in Atlantic City in mid-May, if you are interested in that, and I extend an invitation to you to that one as well. One of the other things that I do in my other life, outside of being president of NSTA, is I'm professor and department head at the Department of STEM Education at North Carolina State University. And in that respect, I work with teachers to be and in-service teachers and administrators to help them understand the importance of STEM, especially at the pre-K through 12th grade level, but also at the university level. And I can share with you briefly that undergraduate science education is really a targeted area for change. We really need to have the undergraduate science education also fire up the passion Michelle and the other panelists have spoken about this morning, and really have that experience be a very positive and rewarding experience, and have people understand that, yes, I can do science as well. I can understand STEM. It's not beyond me to understand what this means and the importance on my life, and then how I can communicate that to my students. So I'm happy to talk further with you about this during the panel.
All right, great. Well, you guys see what I mean about this panel. Now, I cannot help myself. This is the reporter in me, but I'm sure everyone knows what STEM stands for. But just in case, it is science, technology, engineering, and math, in case there's any other reporter in the room who maybe wouldn't have known what that was. Before we get to our panel discussions, we've got so many questions, I have got to introduce you to our Siemens winners. They are absolutely amazing and industrious and so smart. So can you three come on up here, please? Just stand on up and we'll make some room. So we're going to start here with our team winners, Ziwan Liu and Cassie Kane. I love this project they did. They actually used an Xbox. Our kids would love this at home, but I'm going to let them explain it to you.
So the system that we created is affordable, it's portable, it's accessible, and we're hoping to get it out to third world countries and rural areas in America that don't have access to gate labs, but still need the same kind of medical attention. So we're really excited to help a wide range of people affected by movement impairing conditions. That includes amputees, people with brain injuries, joint replacements, so on. So would you like to say anything?
Yeah, our project is definitely about science, but the other aspect of it is its attractiveness. It's definitely out there to attract people to not just do science for its applications, but do science for the heck of it. And yeah.
That's a good way of putting it, I think. You guys make me feel like a complete slacker. Anyway, so moving on. Angela Zhang, your research focused on cancer cells, I believe. Is that right? And I understand that she put in 1,000 hours on this project and yet still found some time for golf somewhere in there. That's the way I heard it anyway. Tell us a little bit about your work.
So I made an iron oxide gold nanoparticle that it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of cancer treatment, and that it can detect and bind to cancer cells in the body, as well as cancer stem cells, the perpetrated cause of cancer, as well as cancer recurrence. And so then the second function is that you can irradiate the tumor with a laser, and it'll heat up this polymer in the nanoparticle, which will cause it to release a chemo drug. So this way, it specifically kills the cancer cells while leaving normal cells unharmed. And then the final function is that it has imaging properties, so you can monitor the treatment response. I apologize if that was a little bit technical. I see some of you not paying attention. So.
Are you talking about me? Okay, so anyway, before we let you guys sit down, I have to ask you, you know we're here today talking about eliminating disparities. Obviously, you all three are huge success stories, but did any of you come up against any barriers in terms of getting involved in science? And if you did, what were they? How did you get around it? Any thoughts on that? Okay, great.
All right, so Z1 and I are both from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and we're lucky enough to have a national lab just 15 minutes down the road from either of our houses. So math and science have definitely always been really evident in the town that we live in. However, with that kind of comes the high expectations of being involved in math and science and being very good at math and science. And so there were definitely times in my life, and I've lived in this town since I was 2, where I thought that I wouldn't live up to the expectations of working at the National Lab, which are where my parents work. But Oak Ridge High School has always been, Oak Ridge school system in general actually, the entire community has been one of the biggest reasons that I've pursued math and science, just because there's a whole community behind you, supporting you and saying that if you do fail once or twice, that there's still a lot of people in the community who have been down that road and who understand that you have to try again until you get the right answer, and sometimes don't get to the right answer. So I would definitely say that community is one of the biggest things that has helped me, just being in a community that isn't trying to push you in a different direction, but is like supportive of research and students. So.
Is there anything else that either of you would want to add about what we can as adults sort of learn from you in terms of making this happen for more young people? Simon?
Yeah, there's definitely a hand to guide us. For me, it was definitely my parents, but parental support from the community, definitely, like Cassie says, plays a huge part.
Thank you so much. Angela, did you want to add anything? There.
Yeah, I did face a couple of challenges, mainly one about age, because I know the first time I went to my professor, he's like, I asked him, I was really excited, asked him, can I work in your lab? And he's like, absolutely not. You're 14, you don't know anything. But I was pretty fortunate to have those experiences, to be able to read articles and develop that foundation. But I understand that I am very fortunate that I was able to have an amazing university near me. And so I think one of the main goals for the future is that students who don't necessarily have those resources do have access to those resources and can take the same steps as I was fortunate enough to do.
What wise advice. Thank you to all of you, and congratulations, my gosh. Good for you. All right, thank you. I'll take that down. And you guys feel free to jump in on our conversation at any point if you'd like to. You probably have more cogent comments than I do in some cases. So we are going to get to all of our questions now. Just before we do, there's a couple of ground rules and things I just want to go over with everybody. One of the things is this. We would like to try to stick to the topic at hand. We're not talking about general issues in STEM education. We are really talking about the importance of increasing minority participation in those areas. So please, let's try to stay focused on that. I know it's tempting to kind of, wander around a bit. I do want to also mention, as Jim said, that we're going to open this up to the audience. So audience members, start thinking about your questions and comments. Do not make me call on you. Okay? Thank you. And just so that we are all on the same page on this, when we talk about underrepresented minorities, we are talking about women, people with disabilities, and 3 racial ethnic groups, Blacks, Hispanics, and American Indians. And the statistics really show us that when you look at those groups, there's a gap. And sometimes a very significant gap between the percentage of the population that they make up and the degree to which they are studying and working in science and engineering fields. I think as we know from looking at the research, the bottom line is that the science and engineering workforce is really still largely white and largely male. So with that in mind, let's get started. I'm going to throw out the first question to our panelists. What grade would you give the U.S. at this moment in time for how we are doing on issues of diversity in STEM? Anybody want to tackle that to start with?
I'll start.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that.
I'd give it an incomplete.
Wise. That's a good one.
But, and the reason for it is that if you define success as, having the same percentage of the population as the minorities represent in the total population going into STEM, then it's an incomplete. I mean, we're not there. But, there's been progress. So sometimes in the United States, we are very definitive that either it's good or it's bad. And clearly, making progress is very important, and I think we sometimes have to step back when you're looking at these kind of issues and see where we were and look backwards to say, hey, we've had some success. What are those successes? Let's celebrate those. What makes minority involvement in STEM good? How's it happened? And maybe we can replicate some of those programs along the line to keep the progress going. But it's still certainly not enough.
Irving, I got to imagine you have a thought on this one.
Absolutely. I actually agree with incomplete. As I was thinking about the question, I thought about all of the years that I spent as a college professor and how I graded my students. And I guess I would tend to give an eye to a student who still had some issues, but for whom I thought that there was some progress, and there was some possibility of, with some additional work and effort and energy and enthusiasm, to be complete. If you assign some numbers to this, I think it helps to make, for me, the incomplete grade a little bit more real. About 34% of 18 and 24-year-olds in America today, college-age population, represented by underrepresented minority groups, yet less than 13% of the baccalaureate degrees in engineering being produced by those groups. About 43% of school-aged children in the United States today are URMs, again, 77% or so of the engineering workforce predominantly white. At the same time, there are a number of national efforts that are underway to try to move more young people into science careers, to try to excite diverse communities to get engaged. We've just seen some examples of that here a few moments ago. But there are lots of efforts nationally. And so the real issue is, how can we learn from some of the efforts that are underway, really extract from that the best practices, and really try to drive scaling up and policy kinds of changes that are going to result in some real change. So for that balance, I say incomplete.
So it is getting better, but is it getting better quickly enough? I would throw that out as well. Does anyone have an opinion on how quickly we're moving?
I'll jump in, and I will give a grade, and I'll be a little bit harsh in my grading, I guess. I'd say maybe C minus, D plus. And I say that largely because it hasn't changed that much. And if you look at education, you look at science education going back 100 years, how much has it changed today? I mean, yes, we have some iPads in the classroom, but we're still kind of cramming math and science down the throats of these kids. And I think that what the United States needs to do is take a much more kind of anthropological approach and understand what are the differences between these kids. And, how do girls learn math versus boys? And we look at, in our programs, we have a robotics program, and we've got quite a few girls that were really excited about robotics. And that was because they could use robotics and in a narrative fashion, for example, create stories around robots and using robotics and telling stories. And that sort of fit with what they wanted. Now, of course, there were boys who want to tell stories as well, but there are also boys who want to do sumo wrestling and battling the robots. But I think that understanding the psychology of these kids is going to be a big part of getting more minorities interested. And in the case of robotics, getting more girls interested, it's, what is the curriculum for robotics, and how does it fit with the psychology of girls as opposed to boys?
Well, that's a question I'm actually really interested in, the myth around gender and the idea that girls don't really do science as well. Girls aren't good at math. I know that I heard that, and all of a sudden went from being a good math student to like not such a good and interested math student somewhere in middle school. And I don't know, is it really someone's ability dropping off, or is it somehow are girls learning, you know, even if it's in a very subtle way, that you're not expected to do well in that, therefore you don't have to. Michelle, do you have a thought on that?
Sure, I'd like to jump in on this. I'd like to give some positive news that I think we have made some progress. I think we're better than a D-. Usually when I speak with a PowerPoint, the very first slide that I show is a picture of my class. And the first thing that people notice is that it's about 50% male, 50% female. I think we have made real progress on the gender issue, which is not to say that there isn't more room to be made. But, you know, when I went through school, I only ever had one female science teacher, and that was in the 6th grade. Whereas right now in our high school, we're 50% male-female. And physics and mathematics are particularly troublesome. My husband teaches physics. I'm very in tune with that particular issue. But, you know, it's already been said, a lot of it goes back to role models. You know, very interesting how our students perceive what a scientist can be. I spoke with elementary school students in November, kindergartners through 5th graders, and I asked them, because I knew they would be honest, to tell me if they thought I looked like a scientist. And 50% of the kids said no. So where does that come from? Like, why? At the kindergarten level, would a student very quickly tell me, no, you know, is it because I have curly hair? Is it because I'm a girl? What is it? So I think that there are some perceptions that are very entrenched. I think we are moving the best on the gender issue. I think we're probably still further behind on the other issues, the students with special needs, students from diverse ethnic backgrounds.
I would also like to jump in on this issue, and I would echo what Michelle said as well. There is no neurobiological basis to say that girls and boys cannot learn science. Okay, I would just say that. We know that from the evidence on learning. So it's more of the cultural expectations and perhaps the whole notion of role models, which really does play very heavily in this. And if you look at the national data, you do see the trends where females and males and all kids really are about on track in the elementary school level in terms of science learning. And then about 6th, 7th grade, you start to see the females dropping down drastically. And again, that's a challenge for us to take on because that really bothers me. That is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. So how can we best deal with that? How can we address that issue head on? You know, so again, at NSTA, what we principally do is we work with our teachers, new teachers, beginning teachers, veteran teachers, supervisors, university people, everyone, informal educators. There's a tremendous resource out in the informal science education world that we really aren't tapping into. I think I read a statistic somewhere that said much of science learning takes place outside the classroom. That has some real implications for what we need to think about and what messages are communicated about who does science learning, who can be successful in science learning, and that sort of thing. I've gone to the robotics exhibit, like the Legos exhibit. If you go to any of the museums or science centers or places like that, go to the robotics and the Legos exhibit area if they have one, and you will see kids engaged there. All kids will engage. And to me, as an educator, that's my challenge, is how do we promote that idea where we engage every single student in the pursuit of understanding science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and really help them learn to be successful at that, whether they choose a career in STEM or not.
Young people, a program that reflects them, but it's a challenge. I mean, having been in that position as well, I know. Tell me a little bit about that for you.
Well, I think it's very different in different disciplines. For example, we made a series called Making Stuff on material science. Excuse me. And we actually did not have that much of a problem finding women and minorities. There were lots of them in that field. I'm not sure why, but, and in the MRS, the Materials Research Society, it's really run and controlled by women. I mean, it's just great, and we also found a lot of minorities. When we made another series on theoretical physics called The Fabric of the Cosmos, and I think we found like 3 theoretical physicists who really could, I mean, you know, we have a lot of criteria for choosing
course, yeah.
people, but still, there were really just a handful of women. And so we actually did some research to see whether it was just our problem or whether this was a problem in the field. And it is true that fewer than 1 in 10 of theoretical physicists are women. And certainly when you go up through the ranks of graduate student, postdoc, you know, assistant and associate professors, and, you know, you try to get to people who are really very solid in their discipline. And I think sometimes, and this is something my producers really have to get used to, you know, if we're going to just have full professors, and if you're only going to choose the kind of venerable, you know, experts whom everybody knows, you're going to have a tough time finding broader representation. And so what we're trying to get our people to do is to really kind of overcome our own prejudices of the safety that comes with going to somebody who is a super solid, recognized expert, and use younger people who may not be so experienced, but also are doing really interesting work and have something important to say. And I think as we do that more and more, and especially on our Nova Science Now spinoff, which is a magazine program, and it really focuses on the process of science, doesn't demand stories that really have a result at the end or some great finding. We're really having a much easier time in finding younger people. I just wanted to say that today in the chess column in the New York Times, it asked that question, why are so few of the expert chess players women? Is it because there's something in female brains that just can't play chess, some spatial thing or something? And they looked at the experience in chess across international boundaries, and they found that there are enormous cultural differences, which would imply that there's really nothing wrong with female brains when it comes to chess. So this question is, you are seeing it, you know, I didn't expect to read it in the chess column, but I thought that was very interesting.
I think it's something people are talking about a lot. Ira, did you want to add anything to that?
We embarked on I get to call it a campaign. We sit down with our producers and we say, what are the uncovered parts of science, and who's not getting visible? Because the real problem with education is visibility now. The media is not in the business of teaching anybody anything or educating anybody. They're in the business of selling you something, and they will tell you, you know, we're just out here to sell stuff, and we don't care if you learn anything or not. So somebody, and I feel personally, you know, somebody has to think about actually giving out some real knowledge to people, because we really have to make some decisions. And who are those people that we really want to hit sometimes? Those are youngsters. And we had started a series on bringing youngsters who are winners in science fairs or winners in any kind of competition, because those are people who are out front. And we started a series of bringing them on. We ran out of money right at the early stages of the series. Maybe we'll find some more and be able to continue that. But they are out there. There are kids out there. And I'm popping into my mind is Maker Faire. How many of you were at the Maker Faire out in Queens, at the New York Hall of Science? Tens of thousands of kids, teenagers, young adults are out there showing off the stuff that they do. If you want to find out where the creativity is, you should have no problem finding kids. And this being New York City, Queens, the most diverse neighborhood in the whole world, right, had plenty of kids from all walks of life and all kinds of interests showing off their stuff. But no one gets to show these people. No one gets to see them. No one gets to highlight who they are. And that's what we are trying to do in our own little way. And that's the real problem, you know, is getting some visibility for these kids who do these things as role models. And if you tap into these kids, you'll see by the diversity of the kids who won the Siemens or the Intel or these other fairs, they're there. They just, no one knows that they're there, and no one gives them any sort of recognition. And that's what we're trying to do.
That's an interesting point. I want to talk, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom. Did you want to add something?
I was just going to tell Paula that the next time you're looking for somebody, let us know, because our first winner of the Siemens competition was a gal by the name of Maria Angelou. And she is a theoretical physicist. She's graduated from Stanford, and she's working in CERN, Switzerland. So we have many examples of young ladies who have made it big.
Actually, Maria was has been on our show, so I think she's great. And you know, when you find someone like Maria who's not only brilliant, but really a vibrant speaker and terrific. You know, she's really a prize.
That's
Terrific person.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about the barriers. We've talked a little bit of sort of where the state of the situation is. Let's talk a little bit about what are the barriers for these students. Jerib, I'm sure, you know, you work with children, you work in education. When you look at your students, what do you see are the things that they struggle with in terms of getting into these STEM fields?
One of the things that I notice, not just in dealing with my students, and I guess I can bring an interesting perspective to this answer in terms of having worked in Boston and New York. And distances aren't great, but the students were very different. I think that one of the major barriers to achievement in STEM happens to be centered on the area of being able to meet students where they're at. There are a lot of interesting things that students bring to the table. However, the way that we traditionally teach science, a very book, top-down type method, doesn't necessarily attract today's middle school or elementary school student. And we have a challenge of trying to keep students, as has been mentioned before, interested at the level that they are in elementary school and sustain that through middle school and high school. And it's very challenging. So I think, you know, in terms of trying to meet students where they're at, that's a very important thing. I think some of the ways that we can do that are through technology, through music, through art. These are the things that students are very, very interested in. One of the things that I try to do in my classroom is incorporate technology into the day-to-day doing of science. You'll find that the policy at a lot of schools, particularly in urban schools, is the technology is suppressed. So the cell phones have to be turned off. They have to be put away. One of the things that I try and do is bring that technology into the classroom. So we're currently working on a window farm right now, which is a hydroponic window farm in our classroom. Frequently, I'll let the entire class go by, and I have to get better at this. And we've worked the entire period, and just being in the middle of that, I've forgotten to take as many pictures as I can. I have to get better at assigning a student to be that resource to get those pictures. But what I'll ask them to do is, look, you know, if we're doing something, and I agree that a lot of the science learning takes place outside of the classroom. If we're doing something, and the project entails, let's say it's physics, or let's say it's environmental science, one of my homework assignments might be to go home, and on the weekend, I might want you to email me or text me a picture, as well as a written synopsis of exactly what it is that you've seen or involved yourself in over the weekend doing science. And this is a unique opportunity to engage students outside of the classroom. It's a non-traditional learning environment, and they're doing science, and I can track that. One of the challenges with that is maybe the cell phone policy that the school has. They don't want you to interact with the students via cell phone over the weekend or even during class. Now this is a very big challenge, and I think that we need to meet that, and we need to think about ways to resolve some of these immediate barriers to learning science.
I want to drill down on this question a little bit more. It's an interesting point that you made about meeting students where they are. But specific in these STEM issues, what do you think it is that's turning kids off at some point? Is it that perhaps it feels too hard at some point? Is it that it's presented in a way that's dry? What's going on there? Why do we lose students?
I'd like to chime in on this one. Yes and yes. And I'd also like to say that many of our students see science as something for the elite, something exclusive.
That's a really interesting
something
point.
that only a certain people deserve to be a part of. And I hate to say it, but we project that image on our students as well. And I know this because of the questions that I get asked. Here's some of the questions that I get asked as National Teacher of the Year. How can you teach chemistry to deaf students? The very first question I was ever asked in an interview as Maryland Teacher of the Year was, your background, AP Chemistry, special ed, aren't they polar opposites? I often get asked why a student in our career and technology education program would be in my AP Chemistry class. Because certainly a student who has vocational talents and interests couldn't possibly also be interested in AP Chemistry. And frankly, we have done this for years. We have this collective attitude of, well, we're going to weed them out. We're going to weed them out. And that especially happens at the college level, the freshman level. We're going to weed them out and see who really deserves to be there. You know, people ask me how I get 92 students in AP Chemistry. I open the door. I open the door. And I know that students will come to me as unfinished products. Yes, they may be English language learners and maybe they're struggling with their language competency. Yeah, maybe their math skills are weak, but honestly, you know, something like science, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I can't decide as a teacher in the first or second week of class who deserves to be there and who doesn't. But students perceive that science and STEM is still something unattainable, and that's, I think, one of the most tremendous barriers that we have right now.
Yes, absolutely, Eric.
As someone outside the box looks at the black box at the science education, I see one of the weaknesses of the educational system and of science, because I've been doing this for 40 years, is that that science is taught in school as a profession. We don't teach it as something to study. We don't teach kids what science is about. We don't teach them about the history of science, who the great scientists were. If we were teaching an art class, we're not going to just get up there and draw things on a wall. We're going to teach you about the great artists and what got interested in the history of art and art. There's a whole discipline about that. How much do we do that with science in classrooms? Where they're doing chemistry, where they're doing physics. We don't teach you why Galileo was why was he so fascinated with these planets? What was going on in the time? What was going on with Copernicus? What's their history? What is the context of all of this? And this is how you make science human. You bring the humans into science and see that scientists were humans, and people can say, gee, maybe I could do that. My favorite example of this is Albert Einstein. We all have pictures of Albert Einstein in our schools, but what's the picture we have of him? Is the Hollywood stereotype, the white-haired guy with the hair and the bad suit and everything else. That's not who Albert Einstein was. Albert Einstein was 26 when he did the theory of relativity at first. He was 26. He was a sexy young guy. You see a picture of him at 26, you'll see that. Why don't we show that picture to students and say, you don't want to be that old guy, but you might want to be this guy.
So we got to make science sexy?
Well, look at the Big Bang Theory, the second most popular show on CBS with some geeky physics people. Look how popular, well, Science Friday was on that show and helped them get up there, but that's another story. But we don't teach science like we teach other disciplines. We put it up there in that tower that you can't reach. We can show you how you can be, a student can be a scientist. And one other thing we don't teach is we don't teach that scientists fail all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They fail all the time. You talk to a scientist, they'll say, we're just cleaning debris out of the way, and then we see what's left after all the debris is. All we do is teach kids that you have to be, you have to be a success at everything. No one remembers who lost the Super Bowl, right? If you came in second or you did something bad or you had a mistake in your lab, you get criticized for that. We have to teach kids that science is also about failure, and it's something that they should not be afraid of trying because they're going to fail like most scientists will. I'm done with my soapbox.
It was a good one. Thank you. I was really surprised as I was preparing for this to read that I think it's about 40% of students who plan on going into engineering and science majors end up switching to other subjects, and many of them don't get a degree at all. And I was very surprised by that because I would think by the time you get to college and you're pretty focused on that topic. And I wonder, from a business perspective, Tom and also James, do you think that we are, as a country, in our university system, really turning out the caliber of students that we need? And is there a large enough pool of those students, given that kind of rate? Are there enough candidates out there?
I think there's 5 million, give or take a little bit, of scientists and engineers in the workforce. And if you kind of project that over a 40-year period, you're saying we need about 100,000 to 120,000 scientists and engineers every year to just sustain that 5 million population. So we need a lot of young people going into math and science to be able to sustain the kind of jobs and economy and the types of solutions that we're going to need to the big problems that we all face. So clearly there's a need, and we obviously as business people import a lot of our students from overseas because they come here to do graduate school. If you look at the statistics, graduate students, undergraduate, not a lot of foreign engineering and science people. As we get to master's and PhD, it goes up tremendously. So they're a real resource for us, and we need that. But those are also opportunities that could be produced through the U.S. educational system. So clearly, I think that you asked two different questions, and the first
I'm
question.
often guilty of that.
Yeah, do we need them? We need them, and they're great careers, and we need to continue to push hard to get more students into those disciplines. The second question, or the first question that you really asked, was once they're predisposed and we get them into college in the scientific disciplines, why can't we keep them? I mean, here they've made a commitment. They've gone through high school. They've said, this is something interesting, and then we fail them in the university setting where they can't make it. And why is that? I think it goes back to this elitism that it's, scientists are kind of got to go through this process of, real struggle, and they got to persevere, and they've got to be able to learn how to do it on their own, as opposed to having people say, hey, we got them, let's nurture them. Let's figure out what it is that they're missing that they can't get from point A to point B now. And I think the universities are failing these young people because they treat everybody the same. And once you get to this more independent study setting, some people can do that, some people can't. And having interested professors who can push students and help students and make students believe in themselves. And okay, so it takes 5 years to get through engineering school. My daughters, that was pretty good. I wish they all were only going through in 5 years. So, it's not necessarily a 4-year curriculum and you got to get out and get a job. It's, you've got to learn through this process and help them. If they're already predisposed to science, let's keep them in science.
And particularly for these underrepresented minorities, what do you, panelists, any thoughts on how we target them and what the junction is in their educational trajectory that's most critical in terms of holding on to them and keeping them on track?
Just on that point,
Yeah.
to follow up on the response to your last question. In addition to the changes that are taking place in engineering education from a curricular pedagogical perspective, they're being talked about in Journal of Engineering Education. Lots of universities are making these kinds of changes, more cohorts, more learning communities, more individualized instruction, more student support. There's an important role for business in this whole issue of retention to degree as well. One of the things that we emphasize in our NACME scholarship program is the early connection of our NACME scholars to our corporate partners. And we ask our corporate partners to provide internship experiences, to provide role modeling kinds of experiences, to really get engaged with our students in their trajectory through that 4 or 5, usually 5-year undergraduate engineering journey. At the end of that experience, we survey all of our graduating seniors, and we ask them, to talk about their undergraduate experience and to try to give us some sense of the variables that have contributed to their success or may have operated against their success. In every year, the #1 variable that is talked about from a success perspective is the opportunity to connect with a corporate partner, to engage in some real-world engineering experience. That they define as being a major factor in
It's that
helping the
seeing
retention,
forward.
also helping the motivation. So I know later we're going to be talking about the role of business and corporations in all of this. I think that early identification and connection is an important variable that we really need to
I want to come
explore.
right back to that. But James and then Paula, I know you had something you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I love what everything is saying about this connection and the corporate connection. I think it's fantastic. But you also need to think about business. We tend to think about business as, big companies. But there's a whole different world of business, which is the entrepreneurial side and the small companies. And that's really where the job growth is coming from. It's small companies, it's not big companies. And how are scientists and engineers getting into smaller companies and into entrepreneurial ventures? I mean, it's happening in Silicon Valley, but if you're a scientist, if you're studying chemistry or you're studying physics at NYU, what kind of applications does that have for small companies and for entrepreneurship? How is a scientist in college getting connected, not necessarily with Siemens, which might be fantastic, but also getting connected with a small entrepreneur who wants to take that physics and create something unbelievable? And how do you, and that's also something that a kid can look forward to and say as a sort of role model. Not just about doing science, you know, for a big company, but doing science for a small company that has the opportunity to make a really big difference in the world, to do something really creative and innovative. So it's using science in an innovative way. And I'm not sure that we're doing that yet, because there are lots of brilliant scientists in college and brilliant researchers, but they're not getting connected with the entrepreneurs and connected with the small companies and connected with investors, because investors don't speak the language of science typically. And they're having a hard time connecting. If we can connect more of those investors that can put money in the hands of that woman who's doing physics at NYU, we can create some companies and create some jobs and create some excitement for the scientists.
Paula, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I also think that there's a very big difference between draw and retention. I think we are doing better, and the numbers show we're doing better in drawing kids into the sciences in college and then in graduate school. And that's great, but what happens when they get there? So I highly recommend an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago which looked at the undergraduate experience in engineering. And these kids just felt that you know, they were killing themselves, working really hard, and their friends who were majoring in you know, other less rigorous disciplines were not working that hard. I think they look at the job market. Kids today are extremely vocationally oriented, and honestly, who can really blame them? And you know, they see things like all the engineers who are going to be laid off in the space program, and I think that that's scary to them, very scary, and they think, I'm killing myself, I'm working this hard, but what lies ahead? Will I be able to really get a job? And then in graduate school, actually, it's even worse, and I have some numbers. So underrepresented minorities, and I think this is the case for minorities and for you know, the general population, but unrepresented minorities comprise about 18% of overall enrollment and in science and engineering degrees, but they get 14% of the master's degrees and a tiny percent, 5.4% of science and engineering doctorates. So you have to really ask what it is that's going on in these doctoral programs. And I just have to say one thing about a woman who, I actually hired somebody who was a postdoc at Harvard in molecular biology. I mean, you know, this girl could like think rings around me. And you won't believe this, but I was moving and I was looking for someone to help us get organized, you know, because I had 2 kids who, you know, went off to college in their lives and left all their possessions at home and never cleaned out their rooms. So I really needed some help. And this young woman came in, and you know, we got to talking, and I just was kind of amazed that she would invest so much time and energy, and clearly she was good, terrific. And she just said, I just could not see a potential for a life with my family in academic molecular biology. I just couldn't see it. So I think she couldn't see a path for herself. And I've heard that experience more and more, and I think that that's, you know, applies to, and I think social things, I think connecting with people who are professionals and who have managed to do both work and family, I think that's an issue for a lot of guys too.
I think it's seeing a role model in some way, seeing someone who sort of reflects you a little bit. You can see yourself, and then you can say, well, then I can go forward to that. I want to get back to this issue of business because, Tom, do you think that businesses have more than a role, maybe a responsibility in terms of bringing these underrepresented minorities into these fields and really nurturing them so that the next group of students sees someone who looks like them in the workforce and can relate to that person?
When you deal with business, you have to deal in the terminology of business. And the way I would always kind of frame these issues within Siemens was minorities represent half of the population or more. And why would you shut out half of your potential entrepreneurs and future employees by not encouraging women and minorities into the scientific disciplines? It's an economic issue. I mean, don't talk to a lot of people in business aren't going to want, you know, they don't get turned on by their social responsibility. But they get turned on by their economic responsibility. It's an economic issue for businesses, and as that, it then is an imperative that businesses need to reach down further into the school systems, starting really at the elementary school level, because this is where the whole process begins, and do things that are encouraging young people to be able to pursue these kinds of disciplines. And of course, I know it's a funny phrase now in the Republican debates, but corporations are people. and Siemens has 60,000 people in the United States, and every one of them gets up in the morning and puts their clothes on and gets in the car and drives to work and has all the worries and concerns of families. And that's whether it's the CEO or whether it's somebody who's running a CNC machine in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, clearly, this is an important issue. It's a personal issue, and all people in corporations really do need to harness their people to be able to help in this process.
This is always sort of a controversial question, but do you think that there is a role anywhere in this for incentives for teachers, incentives for students? Patricia, any thought on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for setting that up. Michelle and I have been dying to jump in the conversation. Absolutely. Let me share one statistic with you about science teaching in particular. The beginning science teacher on average makes $34,000, $32,000 a year. The same person going into a science or engineering field makes $20,000 more every year. We need good people to go into teaching, to fire up our K-12 population, to really, that's the largest workforce sector in this country. And I don't think we think in those terms, okay? So we have an opportunity here, especially in terms of STEM, that we can address this issue head on, starting at elementary level. We were talking during lunch as well, just briefly, about the importance of what happens at the elementary school level. How can we get our teachers on board with this so that they become, advocates of STEM education, and they're not afraid of STEM, and they don't go to pieces at the word mitochondrion. Okay, we love mitochondria. We're there. We get that. But there are many people, believe it or not, and I found this shocking too, that endoplasmic reticulum doesn't do anything for them, okay? Now, I say that's a very specialized biological term, but we resonate with that because we love science and STEM, and it's hard for us to understand how people perhaps are intimidated by STEM fields. So we have to look to ourselves and say, what can I do? For example, the average elementary classroom may have science taught 20 minutes or 30 minutes at the end of the day on Friday afternoon. To me, that, again, is not acceptable. We need to take that issue head on. Now, there are a lot of variables involved in why that has been happening, but if we don't start putting pressure on the school systems and the teachers and the parents and the community to change that, then we're going to continue to see a pattern here where people are not going to look seriously at STEM and STEM careers or STEM to see that could be a possible workforce line for them to pursue, an interest area or whatever. So we have to take responsibility ourselves for helping to educate and to advocate for that. Incentives can work to a certain degree to get people in the door, but they aren't the only answer. The real answer comes from making a commitment to the best teaching and learning that we can possibly provide at all levels.
We could keep going for a long time, but I want to open this up to our audience members. And the hands are coming up already. I think we have some microphones. All right, thank you so much. Gosh, let's start right there because I saw you first.
Okay, so I want to rip the scab off a little bit here. I'm a science teacher, and I dropped out of a science research PhD program, so I'm one of the people that was recruited but didn't stay in it. So I want to challenge the idea that science isn't elite. I would say that going into science is, in a sense, something that's elite because there are so many failures, and it takes a persistence and a certain level of determination and confidence. If some of you have mentioned that science is very creative, and to be creative, you have to have a certain level of lower stress. You have to have an open mind. You have to have your basic needs met. So I wanted to ask Jerib a little bit about the Harlem Children's Zone Academy, Promise Academy, approaching it as it takes a village to raise a child. And what are some things, and at an interpersonal level, I think we've been talking a little bit abstract and kind of up here. What about the responsibility of individual people? What can people do in terms of making that interpersonal relationship to mentor the child through how do you cope with the failures and the disappointment of your experiment not working the first time?
Well, it's a difficult question to ask. I mean, I think you need to address it from many different perspectives. Trying to leave this bird's eye view that we've been talking with and kind of drill down a little bit to the underserved, underrepresented minorities in STEM. I think there are a lot of different things that we have to talk about. I happen to work with some very committed individuals, and I think that our students have a lot of support, both in the school and at home. But there are some class issues that are very serious barriers to the minorities that we're talking about and their ability to achieve in science. I also think that on a policy level, there are many things that need to change. If we are constantly battling with, and I think the last time I checked, we might have been 26th internationally ranked in terms of math and science. If our focus is constantly a battle with our students' ability to achieve and pass a New York State math or ELA test, then the fact that students are only getting science for 20 minutes on a Friday will always be the case. So, I mean, your point is very well taken, but there are so many aspects that need to be addressed on a very micro level in order to successfully impact the students that I think are the topic of conversation here. So, I mean, there are a lot of different things that we need to do.
Through 14 model high school. It's a 6-year program where students actually have the opportunity to complete their high school requirements as well as an AAS. It's a unique collaboration with the City University of New York City Department of Education, IBM. And so every student has a mentor from IBM, and they actually have, it's an open enrollment, so you do not take an actual test to get in. You actually just have to show interest. So there's a wide spectrum of ability, but the expectation is that every student will actually leave with a high school diploma as well as an AAS degree. And so the private partnership and the collaboration of K through 12 and mentors is an actual integral part of that. And so I'm happy that actually to hear the comments about the aspirations of knowing that you said role models, but mentoring is the same thing, that we know we need the outside world, we need the professional world to actually be a part of that. So I'm encouraged, and I want you all to know that actually there are new initiatives happening. New York City, the mayor just announced that 3 more 9 through 14 models, as well as Chicago announced that 5 9 through 14 models will actually be opening in September.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mark Anthony Thomas. I'm the director of City Limits Magazine. What I wanted to mention was, you know, a lot of the conversation that we're now having is kind of where we are in our society. A lot of the institutional disparities existed until the 1950s, 1960s. Just in my lifetime, I met so many first. You were the first this or the first that. And you realize, like, if a lot of these people are still alive, then a lot of these opportunities have just been presented for them. And to some extent, since that era, America has taken this organic approach to just filtering its students to wherever they fall. Like, I was a computer science student as a high school kid, and that just seemed awkward. So remember, that just seemed awkward that this guy is interested in computer science. And to some extent, a lot of the people who are my age now, if you meet us, if we've gone into some very specific fields, there's some kind of program or some kind of private investment that got us there. And you literally could ask people, and you don't even have to do it in a racially charged way, but just maybe ask, like, well, was there some kind of incentive that made you go into new media or into science or into math? And I guarantee whether it was Bill Gates, whether it was a Pell Grant, whether it was something propelled us to that industry. So what I've learned from that is really to take the non-organic approach. We really have to have more of that private investment, more of those outside incentives, because unfortunately, with our political climate, it won't come from the government at this point. So we do have to encourage and engage more philanthropy to really make that kind of difference.
Got it. These women right here have been waiting very patiently right up here in the second row.
I'm Nicole Gillespie from the Knowles Science Teaching Foundation, and I want to sort of summarize something that I've been hearing going around. There's been a lot of talk about teachers, so we're in the business of supporting beginning high school math and science teachers, and we're particularly looking for people with excellent content background, because that is, of course, necessary but not sufficient to be a good teacher. Problem is that pool is not very diverse. So people have talked about this at the undergraduate, graduate level. Coming out of high schools, the kids who are well prepared to do well in college in those fields, not very diverse. When you start looking at K-12, who's teaching those kids math and science? Not very diverse. So we've kind of got this chicken and an egg problem, and I've been hearing this word, encourage being thrown around. So I kind of want to push back on that and say, I don't think encouraging is enough. And I would like to hear the panel comment on some real strategies. Like what can we do besides saying, yeah, go into science? Because we've been doing that for a long time, and I don't think it's working. So I'd like to hear some more about specific strategies for breaking that chicken and egg cycle.
Yeah, do we need essentially like a Title IX for STEM? I mean, it's an idea. Is it something that really needs to be regulated? Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, I have something to say. Yeah, I mean, I just think common sense tells me you have to show people that they're, especially students, you have to show them that there is a path that they can follow in life. If they do not believe that they're going to be able to get a job, and they're going to work hard and have to go through years of education, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of excitement about going into science. They have to see a life ahead of them. So I do think, that is something that our whole society, especially business, has to really think about. How can you provide a career path for kids who are prepared and want to work very hard?
And I'd like to jump in on this too, before you even get to that stage, and I agree with everything you say. I think part of the problem is we expect students to just come to us. And one of the things that we've done in our school, because you ask about real things, what are we doing? We've realized that we've got to go get the kids. We've got to go get the kids. I mean, we do a number of different things. For example, my husband, who's the department chair, teaches physics, visits every single class, talking to students about the science courses that can be taken, what sequence they should be taken in. Every single student gets a grid, a pathway, not just the course guide of the general classes, but how the classes connect. We do STEM fairs. I'm going on January 31st to talk to the entire student population, not just the honor students who we might expect to go into the sciences, but everyone, the career tech students, the special ed students, everyone. And to try to sell them on the idea, you really got to go get the students. And once you get them, then you've got to keep them. And then, of course, retention is the second issue, and the dropout and everything that we've already talked about.
And not just on campus and talk to people that are in other colleges. We do that, but we also go to HBCUs, other colleges where we have a more diverse pool of applicants to talk about the importance, in my case, of going into science teaching or STEM teaching. Why is that important? What are career pathways? What are career opportunities that are available for people that they may not even have considered? So that is one very specific strategy that we use.
Okay, James, I know you want to say something, then we're going to get right back out to the audience, I promise.
Just one quick addition to that. I think also just thinking about the perspective of, how many teachers do we need? And is it possible, could you pick 10 minority teachers who are unbelievable and create, video programs? Can you use technology to deliver their education in some other way? The model of you have a teacher and 30 students, it works, but is there another way to do it? And can you have this, instead of a 20-minute program at the end of a Friday, maybe it's an afternoon on Friday, where they get exposed to 10 different teachers of all different backgrounds that's being broadcast from someplace, or there's a telepresence set up where some kids can ask questions. Can we use technology to give people access to more of these teachers?
There's a question right in the back, right?
Horst Walcott. Is it on? Horst Walcott from the New York City Department of Education. I'm a science teacher, and I am also a scientist, and I think that it's fine to recruit minority teachers, it's fine to recruit good quality teachers. But one of the problems with the quality of the teachers is the issue of practice what you teach. Science is an art that has to be practiced. There has to be that type of bench experience that the students can see and relate to, and it should not just be taught from cookbook laboratory experiences or from the textbook. The teacher needs to be a practicing scientist, and that is where I think cooperative funding needs to come in, and that collaboration with the universities. And that would be my comment.
Right next door.
Thank you. You on here? Yes. Permit me to extend the invitation to those in the audience, as well as those on the panel, to visit the #1 school selected in science and math, and that school is Staten Island Technical High School. Now, Ira, you hit a good spot with me. I can promise you I can provide for you an opportunity of having science students filmed in our new $1 million television studio in science research topics and have these programs aired in 5 boroughs in New York City. In fact, that's one of the missions of the studio.
We've already beat you to it. We've been to your school and taken your students and made videos out of them, the robotics people, so.
I'd like you to come back, though.
Very interesting.
My invitation extends to all of you. My comment deals with, growing up, there was a job out there, and some jobs involved the utilities. There was Con Edison, the phone company, et cetera. These days, our country is not exactly a manufacturing country. I want to know when the United States does become, and I feel that it will, a manufacturing country, and there are jobs and countless number of jobs in engineering, in science, in technology, and math. What we're describing today, what impact will that have? And I'd like to hear from this gentleman right here, please. Okay, when there are jobs, and we're driven by jobs, yes, it's great to get the education, it's great to move on, it's great to get that degree, but when you don't have a job, and you're waiting 4 or 5 years to follow through on what you've learned, okay? And before you answer that, congratulations on 11 years of teaching. I'm teaching 38. I'm still going strong. So you got a few more years ahead of you. Okay, so please.
Today, even before we return to America as, a preeminent manufacturing whatever, there are jobs in engineering. The problem that we face at NACME, and our challenge, is that we have so many young people who haven't a clue about engineering as a viable career path, one that they actually can pursue. Now, it may seem kind of trite, but the fact of the matter is a lot of our kids don't have an engineer living next door, an engineer in the family. I grew up in Harlem. I didn't know what engineering was until I got to Stuyvesant. And when I got to Stuyvesant, all of a sudden I discovered, oh, gee, there's this profession called engineering, that can take the math and the science and contextualize it, project-based, and this is some good stuff and fun and something that you can pursue as a career. So we have a major effort underway to just try to get into our middle schools, for example, our middle school program, with a portfolio of materials, posters, magazines, stories, real-world stories of engineers who look like the kids who are doing some interesting things to help to motivate them to even realize that, in fact, this is a viable career path. We spend a lot of time trying to get these materials into the hands of middle school guidance counselors, for example. My God, have you asked a middle school guidance counselor lately about biomedical engineering? And also parents. So there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done to build a sense of awareness and identity about these various professional options, and then to begin to tie that to the role models, the mentoring, the internships, and the academic experiences that will prepare young people to actually pursue that. That's even before we become the champion of manufacturing for the world again. The fact of the matter is there are real job opportunities and career opportunities for our kids today that too many of our kids are simply not aware of.
Jim, I think we have time for a few more comments, right? True, absolutely. Okay, so I think we're going to go over here, and then we're going to get back up here in the middle.
Hi. Hello. Oh, this is dangerous, a microphone. No, I'm kidding. So my name is Miguel Correro. I work for the Department of Education for the Office of English Language Learners. I'm a math major, so it's very easy to sell this to a person who is in love with mathematics. But I ask myself, why so many students want to be a Hollywood star or even a sports star? And when I think about that, I think about the answer, and it's because as a society, we send a clear message that those fields are important, that those people will be well compensated, and that the information that they receive this information from everywhere in every angle. And so many of them, they don't even care about failing. They can continue to try and they continue to fail to be a sports star because it matters. So as a society, we have to send a clear message that those fields matter. Until we do that, we're just talking about little things. And in order to do that, I think that it's important to create opportunities to individuals like you to interact with students, to show them that. And it's because of that that I want to just let you know that we're trying to do a STEM Expo for English language learners and minority students on April 20th, and I want to invite you all, okay? So thank you.
Thank you. I know you've been waiting patiently right here. Jody, I can see your name tag. Okay.
What is that? My question has to do with, I worked with the program for several years from the National Cancer Institute for students who were from underrepresented groups to get more cancer scientists. And then also spent some time in some schools in the Bay Area that had an engineering program. And in both of those instances, there was either defunding, or in the case of the engineering program, the whole school, their intro to science was actually intro to engineering. And there was lots of evidence that they were bringing in more kids into science because the engineering was hooking them and it was making math-science connections. And their school failed the state tests, and introduction to engineering got replaced by remedial math and science. So I guess I would like to hear you talk a little bit about the ways in which we sometimes are working at, counter purposes and what we might do about that.
Anybody want to jump at that one? Jerib, do you have a thought on that as an educator? I mean, you were commenting about the testing before, which sounds to me like a little bit of what you're getting at.
To me, there are no easy answers to this. I really think, there are the specific case of scaling down from engineering to remedial math and science, it's case specific. I mean, in an area where, for instance, I think it's good that science is being approached, whether it's remedial or whether it's an AP class. I think you have to deal with, again, the students where they are. I think that's a very specific case, though. And losing an engineering class and having it scaled down to remedial math and science might not be the same thing as...
Actually, it wasn't remedial science, it was remedial English.
Oh, okay, remedial English, okay. So I think again, it's for me, it's very case specific. I think that if you have a situation where students are exposed to quality supporting environments where math and science and technology and engineering are focused and integrated into the curriculum at every opportunity, not just STEM, but where there are interdisciplinary connections that can be made with social studies and ELA, because quite honestly, that's a major issue that New York City has in general, is the literacy rate does not lend itself to this deeper understanding and exploration of science, technology, engineering, and math content in the way that would allow students to be successful. So there has to be this sharing of responsibility across the curriculum in order to get some of the movement that I see as important, specifically for students of color. The other thing that I think is important is from an economic standpoint, until there are many students across this city whose parents do not have jobs. So when we talk about what the opportunities are for students in STEM. Until that is addressed, they are always going to look to the easy, quick solutions like, becoming a rapper or being the next phenom in the NBA, because that is reality to them. And again, it goes back to meeting students where they're at. I think if we can approach STEM from areas like technology, an iPod, an iPad, a cell phone, whatever the case may be, and even looking at addressing literacy through those areas and through music and through art, the things that they already find interesting, I think our ability to make STEM a more integral part of their lives would be met with much greater success. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's...
I know we've got questions right here, but did someone on this side of the panel want to comment on the working toward at cross purposes? Did I miss somebody? No? Okay, sorry about that. Right, I know you've been waiting, sir. Just...
Arthur Kamens, the Center for Innovation in Engineering and Science Education at the Stevens Institute. This is kind of in the same realm that you've been talking about just in the last few minutes. I'm curious as to the panel's response about policy drivers and maybe impediments around two issues that I think seem to me to fall most heavily in urban districts. One is time for science, the amount of time, particularly in districts that are struggling with testing pressures, is shrinking. So you can't get interested in science unless you spend some time doing it. And the other is maybe under the category of inspiration, which is what policies might encourage students to think that science is a tool, either as a citizen or as a job, for making a difference in the world around them, so they actually get excited about why they would do it.
Who on the panel would like to tackle that? Anybody? I will call on you.
I'll just say one quick thing. And the country is 236 years old from the Declaration of Independence, and we had our first science fair at the White House. It's over 200 years to get a science fair at that. How many Super Bowl players we've had and World Series players or whatever. Those kinds of things. I ask what kind of role model kinds of things we have to see that, as an example. I'm not sure that answers your question, but that sort of inspirational thing has to be part of our whole society. It just can't be us trying to tell, it has to become woven into the society that this is a career, this is something that should be strived at because this is a nice thing to do. It's as much as becoming an NBA star.
Tom, do you want to jump in?
I would say, that the issues that we grapple with in society, energy, clean energy, energy production, distribution, energy efficiency, water and air, clean water and air, transportation, communications, healthcare, feeding the population. All of these are very, very weighty and problems that are on the tip of the tongue of all our children. I mean, they are idealistic at this age. They understand that those are issues, and they'd like to be a part of solving them. So if we can make sure that they understand that part of the solution to those kind of issues that we grapple with is based in science and math, and they can be a contributor to solving some of these big issues that if we don't get past, whether we worry about this isn't going to be important. So, I think leadership to be able to frame these big issues and questions that are out there, and that they are part of the solution and can create the answers for these questions that are out there, I think can be what the inspiration is for them to be able to say, there's a reason why I want to be an engineer or a scientist, and there has to be jobs when they come out, that there's a place for them to go to create these answers.
The National Academy of Engineering, as I know you know, had a major project a couple of years ago, Changing Conversation, and the whole focus of that was to figure out how to take this notion of the grand challenges of engineering, some of which you've just mentioned, and present that in a way that is not threatening, that does not make it appear as if one, has to be, a super genius or something to be able to make a contribution to resolving some of those challenges, but really developing language in a way to really get kids interested in science and engineering, but building on the inherent interest that kids have in making a difference and in solving problems. And I think that if we can really do something concrete around some of the recommendations that came out of that change in conversation work, if we can find a way to really present science and engineering to young people in a way that is enticing, as opposed to pushes them away, I think that perhaps that's a part of the answer.
I think you'd also, Dean Kamen has a wonderful expression, you get what you celebrate. And his first program with robotics, I think is so wonderful, partly because it involves the corporate mentors, but also because you have the Javits Center filled with thousands of screaming kids. And these kids are building robots, and they're rock stars. And if you can celebrate that, you're going to get a lot more engineers.
I was at that actually this year, and I couldn't believe it. It was like being at a sports event. It really was. It was amazing. We could keep going, but we unfortunately do have to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you so much for being part of this. What a great discussion, and all of you for being here as well. And again, our winners. And Jim.
Absolutely. Just one or two closing remarks I want to share. First of all, we talked a lot about sort of the importance of celebrating, setting role models, showing that it's fun and exciting. And I just want you all to know that our Siemens Competition winners will be ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange tomorrow. So good for them. It's not all hard work. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. Also, to let you know, we have been shooting video of this whole panel, and we will be sending you all a link so that you can take a look at it, share it with other people. We've certainly talked a lot, and the conversation hopefully will continue. But thank you again, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the panel, and have a great day.